Tonight we find ourselves in a place where silence is not merely the absence of sound but a presence all its own. A heavy, watchful thing that settles into the hollows of your bones as you sit hunched over a sloping wooden desk. The only noise in the known world, the soft, repetitive scratching of a quill pen against a sheet of prepared animal skin. You are a scribe in a medieval monastic library, and the year is something like 1247. Though you've long since lost track of such worldly measurements, your life now measured not by the turning of seasons but by the turning of pages and the slow, painstaking march of ink across a folio. The air smells of cold stone, beeswax, and the faint, sweet rot of old parchment, and you will spend the next 10 hours of daylight in this chair, copying a text you cannot read by a light that barely reaches your page, which means you will probably make a mistake that will haunt some scholar 500 years from now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach for your quill, trim the nib with a small knife, and dip it once more into the ink. The scratching resumes. You sit in the frigid quiet of the monastery scriptorium, a large, high-ceilinged room typically situated on the north side of the cloister to avoid the harsh direct sunlight that could fade inks or, worse, cause the parchment to buckle and warp with heat. The winter cold seeps up through the stone floor and through the thin soles of your leather shoes, making your toes ache, but you barely notice it anymore. What you notice is the rhythm, the way your hand moves in a steady, hypnotic arc from the inkwell to the page, the almost musical scratch of the quill's nib as it deposits a thin trail of carbon black ink onto the impossibly smooth surface of the vellum. You are not alone in this room. You can hear the others before you see them. The rustle of a woolen robe as a brother shifts his weight on his hard wooden stool. The occasional wet sniffle from a fellow scribe battling a head cold in this drafty hall. And most importantly, the soft, synchronized scratching of a dozen other quills. A sound like a flock of metal insects chewing patiently through the leaves of history. It is a sound so constant, so woven into the fabric of your waking life, that when it stops for a moment, the silence that rushes in feels violent, almost deafening. Your eyes are your primary tool and your greatest vulnerability. You have been working since prime, the first prayer service just after dawn, and the winter light coming through the arched and glazed windows, covered only with thin, oiled linen to keep out the worst of the wind, is already beginning to fade, even though it's barely past midday. You squint at the exemplar propped on the sloping desk before you, a worn and venerable manuscript lent by a sister house in exchange for a prayer book your monastery produced last year. The text is a Latin commentary on the Psalms, and the handwriting is a dense, crabbed Carolingian minuscule that feels intentionally designed to blur your vision. You are not copying this text because you understand it, or because you have any particular interest in psalm commentary. You are copying it because the armarius, the monastery's armarius, the precentor who runs the scriptorium, placed it on your desk this morning and told you to copy it. Your job is not to interpret or to question, but to reproduce, to serve as a living, breathing, slightly arthritic photocopier 200 years before the concept of a photocopier could possibly exist in the European imagination. You are a conduit, a human machine designed to preserve knowledge you will never personally use. This lack of comprehension is not unusual, nor is it considered a failing. In fact, many within the church argue that it is precisely this humility before the text that makes the work holy. You are not supposed to impose your own flawed, mortal understanding upon the divine word or the writings of the church fathers. You are supposed to transmit them, perfectly and without error, like a stained glass window that merely lets the divine light pass through without claiming to be the light itself. Of course, this high-minded theology does little to alleviate the sheer boredom of copying a text in a language you can barely parse, filled with abbreviations and shorthand that the exemplar's original scribe invented on the fly 100 years ago. You find yourself staring at a word for a full minute, profit time, and your mind wanders. You think about the bowl of pottage you will have for supper, about the chilblains forming on your fingers, about whether Brother Thomas, who sits 2 desks down, will finally finish the opening of the Gospel of John this year. He has been on the first verse for 3 months. In principio erat verbum. You suspect he might be embellishing the capital I with tiny, obsessive-compulsive flourishes of gold leaf that the Almerius definitely did not authorize. You pull your mind back to the task. The quill in your hand is a primary feather from a goose, probably the 2nd or 3rd feather from the wing, which has the best curve and stiffness for a right-hand scribe. You cut the nib yourself this morning with your scribe's knife, a small, indispensable tool that hangs from your belt and doubles as everything from a pencil sharpener to a dinner knife. You cut it at a specific angle, with a small slit up the center to channel the ink, and you've already had to stop 3 times to resharpen it as the tip softened from the constant friction against the parchment. The ink you're using is a basic iron gall ink, made from oak galls, ferrous sulfate, and gum arabic. It starts on the page as a pale gray but oxidizes over the hours to a deep, permanent black. It is also mildly acidic and, over centuries, will eat holes through the very parchment it was meant to preserve, which is a metaphor for something you are too tired to contemplate right now. Your hand cramps. You ignore it. The scratching continues around you, a gentle, persistent reminder that you are part of a collective, a choir of scribes whose voices are not sung but written. This is your prayer, your meditation, your contribution to the divine office. The room grows darker, and you know that soon, a brother will come around to light the few precious candles allowed for those with the sharpest eyes and the most important texts. The flame will gutter and dance, casting long, dancing shadows of your hands across the page, making the letters swim and shift. And still, you will write, because in this world of mud and war and plague and sin, this quiet, repetitive scratching is the closest you will ever come to touching eternity. Your hand hovers over the parchment, quill poised, and you become acutely aware of the immense weight of the object beneath your fingers. This is not paper. This is vellum, or more specifically for this high-quality copy, it is uterine vellum, made from the skin of an unborn calf, a material so fine, so impossibly smooth and white, that it feels less like animal hide and more like a slice of solidified moonlight. You try not to think too hard about the fact that you are writing on death, that this pristine surface was once a living thing, its brief existence cut short solely to provide you with a medium for your letters. The monastery's herds are managed with care, and the pregnant cows are watched closely, because a stillborn or a calf taken prematurely provides the most flawless writing surface imaginable, with no blemishes or marks from a life that was never lived. You run your palm across the page, feeling its almost velvety texture, and you know that a single drop of sweat, a single smudge of oil from your skin, could ruin hours of work. The vellum is so sensitive that it reacts to the humidity in your breath, the parchment sometimes swelling or shrinking as you lean in to inspect a particularly difficult letter. Before the skin ever reached your desk, it went through a process so laborious and foul-smelling that you're grateful the scriptorium is far removed from the tannery. You've glimpsed it, though, on your walks to the river. You've seen the skins soaking in vats of lime water to loosen the hair, a process that takes days and fills the air with a caustic, eye-watering stench. You've seen the brothers tasked with scraping away the flesh and hair with curved knives, stretching the wet skin taut on a wooden frame called a hearse, scraping again and again until it reaches the desired thinness. The scraping is an art in itself. Scrape too deep, and you create a hole, a weak spot that will tear as you write. Leave it too thick, and the vellum will be rough, hairy on one side, and refuse to take the ink cleanly. You can often tell which side of the skin was the flesh side and which was the hair side. as the hair side can sometimes show tiny, ghostly follicles, a faint reminder of the animal's original texture. The best scribes learn to arrange the folded sheet so that flesh side faces flesh side and hair side faces hair side, creating a harmonious, visually consistent opening when the book is bound. You are not yet that skilled. Your pages are a patchwork of textures, and you've learned to adjust your pen pressure accordingly. The cost of this material is staggering. A single large sheet, enough for 4 pages of a book, might represent a week's wages for a skilled laborer. A whole Bible requires the skins of over 200 animals, a small herd, which is why a complete Bible is an object of such monumental wealth that only the richest monasteries, cathedrals, or nobles could possibly commission one. This is why your monastery hoards its texts like treasure, which, effectively, they are. The book you are copying from, the exemplar, is kept chained to a lectern in the library when not in use, its value so immense that theft is a constant, paranoid fear. You've heard stories of pilgrims and even traveling monks who were discovered to be book thieves, cutting valuable leaves from manuscripts in the dead of night and selling them to unscrupulous collectors. The punishment, if caught, is severe, excommunication at the very least, and in some places, a hand cut off, fittingly enough. You glance over at the shelf beside your desk, where your own tools and supplies are carefully arranged. Beside the inkwell and the knife, you have a small pot of pumice powder, which you use to gently abrade the surface of the vellum if it's too greasy or resistant to ink. You have a scraping knife for fixing mistakes, though using it is a delicate, nerve-wracking operation. And you have a lead stylus for ruling the lines. Before you began writing today, you took a straight edge and, with the stylus, lightly scored horizontal lines across the page, creating a faint guide to keep your writing straight. You also scored vertical boundaries at the edges, creating a neat, justified block of text. You do all of this by hand, by eye, and if your lines are slightly crooked, well, that's simply the mark of human labor, a signature of sorts that no machine could replicate. Historians still argue whether these minor imperfections were seen as flaws or as evidence that the work was made by a humble sinner, not a perfect, and therefore prideful, creator. You dip your pen and prepare to start a new sentence. The ink flows from the nib in a thin, controlled stream, and you watch as it darkens from gray to black on the luminous white surface. There is a moment, just as the ink touches the vellum, when everything is potential. A slip of the hand, a sudden sneeze, and that perfect line becomes a ruinous blob. You have seen grown men weep over such blobs. You have seen a finished page, months in the making, discarded because a single drop of spittle flew from a scribe's mouth during a cough and dissolved the carefully applied ink, leaving a pale, irreparable ghost of a stain. The vellum is unforgiving. You can scrape away ink, but you can never fully restore the original surface. There will always be a scar. You hold your breath, just for a moment, as the nib touches down. The scratching resumes, soft and sure, and you exhale. Another line saved. Another small victory in the endless, quiet war against chaos and oblivion. The light has shifted again, that imperceptible crawl of the sun across the winter sky, and you find yourself leaning closer to the page, your nose almost touching the vellum, chasing the last of the usable daylight. Your eyes burn with the strain, a dull, throbbing ache that has become as familiar as the cramp in your hand. You blink rapidly, trying to bring the letters back into focus, but they seem to shimmer and dance on the page, the black ink pulsing slightly against the cream background. This is the hour when mistakes are made, when the mind, weary from hours of repetition, begins to play tricks. You know this feeling well. You know the strange phenomenon where a common word, seen too many times, suddenly looks alien, its letters rearranging themselves into a meaningless jumble. You know the temptation to skip a line, to accidentally duplicate a phrase, to let your eye jump from one et to another et several lines down, losing your place entirely. The exemplar, with its dense blocks of text and its lack of punctuation as you understand it, is a labyrinth, and you are Theseus, trying to navigate its passages without a thread. To combat this, you have developed a set of small, personal rituals. You use your left forefinger as a guide, tracing the line in the exemplar as you read it, moving your finger along at the exact same pace as your quill moves on the page. You whisper the words under your breath, a barely audible murmur that you might mistake for prayer if you didn't know better. Beatus verci non abiet in concilio impiorum. The rhythm of the Latin, even if its meaning is hazy, becomes a kind of chant, a mnemonic device that helps your hand remember what your eye has just seen. You are copying not words, but shapes, sequences of strokes, loops, and ascenders. You could, you realize, copy a text in a language you had never encountered, in an alphabet you had never seen, simply by treating each letter as an abstract drawing. And in a way, that is precisely what you are doing. The Latin of the Psalms, filtered through a commentary written in a scholarly Latin that is even more complex, is a language you grasp only in fragments. You know Deus means God, and Dominus means Lord, and peccatum means sin. Beyond that, you are navigating by shape, by pattern recognition, by the sheer muscle memory of your craft. This is where the particular danger of your work lies. Because you are copying by shape, not meaning, you are uniquely vulnerable to a particular kind of error. The error of the eye, not the mind. You might see a word in the exemplar that has been smudged or faded over the centuries, and you must make a choice. Do you copy what appears to be there, including the damage? Or do you guess at the original form, attempting to reconstruct what the first scribe intended? Most scribes, including you, choose the former. You are not an editor. You are a copyist. Your job is fidelity to the exemplar, not to some abstract concept of the correct text. And so, if the exemplar has a hole where a moth ate through the vellum 100 years ago, you will leave a gap. If a drop of candle wax obscured a word, you will skip it. You will dutifully reproduce the errors of every scribe who came before you, layering your own potential mistakes on top of theirs, creating a palimpsest of human fallibility that will drive future scholars absolutely insane. Your own exemplar, you notice, is riddled with such ghosts. You can see where a previous scribe, perhaps as tired as you are now, accidentally wrote at it and then tried to scrape away the duplication, leaving a rough patch. You can see marginal notes in a different hand, tiny annotations that correct a spelling or offer an alternative reading, and you are faced with the constant question, do you copy the main text, or do you incorporate the correction? The Almarius has given you no guidance on this, so you follow the unwritten rule, main text only. The margins, you decide, are someone else's problem. This decision, made in a moment of fatigue and hunger, will one day puzzle a historian trying to trace the transmission of this text across Europe. They will wonder about the missing variant, the reading that was right there in the margin but somehow never made it into the next generation of copies. They will blame the scribe, you, for laziness or incompetence, not knowing that you were simply cold, your back hurt, and all you could think about was the bowl of soup waiting for you in the refectory. Your mind wanders again, and you catch yourself staring at the intricate penwork of an initial letter on the exemplar. The scribe who created that initial was a true artist, you think. They spent hours, maybe days, on that single letter, filling its interior with delicate interlaced patterns, tiny leaves, and the face of a bearded man peering out from the curves of the B. You have no such talent. Your letters are functional, plain. A serviceable Gothic bookhand that is clear and legible but utterly devoid of personality. This is by design. In many monasteries, individuality in handwriting is discouraged, even punished. It is seen as a form of vanity, a sinful assertion of the self over the sacred duty of transmission. Your hand is supposed to be anonymous, a conduit for the word, not a vehicle for personal expression. You are a tool, a human stylus, and your handwriting is the mark of that humility. And yet, as you scratch out another line, you wonder if, somewhere in the minuscule differences, the slight slant of your the particular curve of your G, there is something that is uniquely you. A tiny, secret signature written 1,000 times over, hidden in plain sight. The bells ring. Their sound crashes through the thick stone walls of the scriptorium, shattering the fragile cocoon of scratching quills and focused silence. You flinch, your hand jerking involuntarily, and you watch in horror as a black scar of ink streaks across the bottom of your carefully ruled page. You set down your quill with a sigh that is part frustration, part relief. It is the hour of sext, the midday prayer, and the entire community is called to the church. You rise from your stool, your back screaming in protest, your knees cracking like dry twigs. You have been sitting in the same position for nearly 4 hours, your body folded over the desk like a piece of discarded linen, and now it is demanding payment for that abuse. You flex your fingers, watching the joints swell and redden, and you follow the other brothers as they file out of the scriptorium in a silent, shuffling procession. The transition from the dim, cool scriptorium to the even dimmer, colder church is barely perceptible. The church is the heart of the monastery, its largest and most impressive structure, but it is still a medieval building, which means it is a permanent winter. Your breath plumes visibly as you shuffle into your assigned stall, the wood worn smooth by generations of backsides before yours. The stone floor sucks the heat from your feet through your shoes, and you can feel the chill seeping up through your legs, settling in your hips. The service begins, a familiar cycle of chanted psalms, responses, and collects, all in Latin, all in a rhythm so ingrained in you that you could perform it in your sleep, which, on some cold mornings, you suspect you partially do. Your mind, however, does not fully engage with the prayers. It lingers back in the scriptorium, worrying about that ink blot, recalculating how many lines you completed this morning, estimating how many days remain on this current gathering of pages. You are a professional procrastinator of the soul. You realize your body is here, in the presence of God, but your mind is elsewhere, wrapped up in the worldly concerns of ink and parchment and deadlines. The Armarius, that same presenter who assigns your work, is also keeping an eye on you during the service, watching for signs of drowsiness or distraction. Monastic life is one of total surveillance, both by your superiors and, you are taught, by God Himself. There is no privacy, no moment when you are not being watched, judged, evaluated. Even your thoughts, the monks are constantly reminded, are an open book to the divine, so you might as well behave as if they are an open book to your abbot as well. You try to focus on the chant, letting the familiar rise and fall of the melody wash over you, but your stomach growls audibly, reminding you that sext is followed by the midday meal, the one substantial reprieve in the long, hungry day. When the service ends, you process not back to the scriptorium but to the refectory, the monastery's dining hall. This, too, is a ritualized space, with long wooden tables and benches, a reader's pulpit where a brother reads scripture aloud during the meal, and a strict, unbreakable silence. You eat without speaking, listening to the drone of Leviticus, your meal a simple affair of bread, a thin vegetable pottage, and a small piece of fish or cheese, depending on the season and the generosity of the local nobility. The food is bland, monotonous, and insufficient for the amount of physical and mental labor demanded of you. But you eat it without complaint because complaint is a sin and also because it's all there is. You scoop the pottage with a piece of bread, wiping the wooden bowl clean, and you think about the ink blot again. You will have to scrape it. You will have to be careful not to scrape through the vellum. The thought makes your already sparse meal sit a little heavier in your stomach. After the meal, there is a brief period of rest, or what passes for rest in a monastery. You are permitted to walk in the cloister, the covered walkway that surrounds a central garden, to stretch your legs and, theoretically, to meditate. You walk slowly, your hands tucked into the opposite sleeves of your robe for warmth, your eyes on the flagstones beneath your feet. The cloister garden is bare in the winter, just a few skeletal bushes and a single, leafless tree. A small fountain trickles in the center, its sound a softer, more organic counterpoint to the scratching of quills you left behind. You pass other brothers, some walking, some standing and staring into the middle distance, some huddled in whispered conversations that are technically against the rules but are generally tolerated as long as they don't become too animated. You envy the lay brothers for a moment, the illiterate monks who work the fields and tend the animals. Their work is hard, physically brutal, but it is simple. They sow, they reap, they mend fences. When their work is done, it is visibly done. Your work, the work of the scribe, is never done. There is always another text to copy, another page to fill, another mistake to correct. You are Sisyphus, but instead of a boulder, you push an infinite pile of parchment up an endless hill. You return to the scriptorium as the bells ring for none, the mid-afternoon prayer. You settle back onto your stool, the wood already feeling familiar against your aching body. You pick up your scraping knife and, with the delicacy of a surgeon, begin the slow, terrifying process of removing the ink blot from this morning's disaster. You hold your breath, your hand absolutely steady, and you scrape, little by little, watching the black ink flake away, revealing the pale vellum beneath. You scrape too much, and you will create a thin spot, a weak point that may tear in the future. You scrape too little, and the ghost of the blot will remain, a permanent stain on your work. You find the balance, somehow, your body knowing what to do even as your mind worries. The blot disappears, leaving only a slightly roughened patch that will, you hope, be less noticeable once the page is filled. You set down the knife, pick up your quill, and dip it in the ink. The scratching resumes, filling the silence once more, and you are back where you belong, a small, anonymous figure in the long, quiet story of the book. The afternoon stretches ahead of you like an endless, gray linen road. Your hand moves, the quill scratches, and the letters form in their neat, regimented rows, each one a small act of submission to the rules of the script. You are working on a particularly dense passage now, a section of the commentary that seems to circle the same idea repeatedly, the same phrases appearing and reappearing like a musical theme you cannot quite escape. Misericordia et veritas obviaverant sibi. Mercy and truth have met each other. The words blur into a rhythm, and you find yourself swaying slightly on your stool, your body keeping time with the scratch of the pen. This is the hour when the mind is most vulnerable, not to the sharp errors of fatigue, but to the slow, creeping errors of disengagement. You are here, but you are not here. Your hand is writing, but your mind has drifted somewhere else entirely. You think about the world outside these walls. You have been a monk for 15 years, since you were a boy of 14, given to the monastery by your family as an oblate, a living donation to the church that ensured your soul's salvation and relieved your parents of the burden of feeding another mouth. You have no memory of that decision, no memory of choosing this life. It was chosen for you. And you have lived it without question because questioning is not something you were taught to do. But sometimes, in the long, quiet afternoons of the scriptorium, you wonder. You wonder about the villages you have never seen, the cities you have only heard described in vague, terrifying terms by traveling merchants who pass through the monastery's guest house. You wonder about women, about the touch of a hand that is not a brother's hand in prayer, about the taste of meat that has not been boiled into submission by the refectory kitchen. You wonder about the world of sound and color and chaos that exists beyond the carefully ordered silence of the cloister. These thoughts are, temptations. They are the whispers of the devil, trying to draw you away from your sacred duty, to plant seeds of discontent in the fertile soil of your boredom. You have been taught to recognize these thoughts and to push them away, to replace them with prayer or with the immediate, physical reality of your work. You focus on the quill in your hand, the slight give of the nib against the vellum, the way the ink pools for a moment before being absorbed. You focus on the shape of the letter you are forming, the careful balance of its curves and straight lines. You focus on anything except the creeping, seductive idea that there might be another life, a different life, a life you might have chosen for yourself. This is the great unspoken truth of monastic existence, the secret that no one discusses in chapter meetings or private confession. The life you live is not the life you would have chosen. And the life you would have chosen is forever just out of reach, a ghost haunting the edges of your consciousness. Your reverie is broken by a soft sound beside you. You look up to see Brother Thomas, the slow scribe from 2 desks down, standing at your elbow. He looks pale, his eyes red-rimmed and watery, and he is holding his quill in a hand that trembles slightly. He does not speak. Speaking in the scriptorium is forbidden except in cases of absolute necessity. But he points to his own desk, then to the door, then makes a vague, helpless gesture with his hands. You understand. He needs to leave, perhaps for the latrine, perhaps because he feels faint, and he is asking you to watch his desk, to ensure that no one disturbs his work while he is gone. You nod once, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and he shuffles away, his footsteps barely audible on the stone floor. You glance over at his desk. His page is open, his quill set down, and you can see the opening of the Gospel of John, the same passage he has been working on for months. In principio erat verbum, et verbum erat apud Deum, et Deus erat verbum. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. His version of the capital I is indeed heavily embellished, a riot of interlace and gold leaf that spills down the margin of the page in a cascade of ornamentation. It is beautiful, you admit, in its obsessive, meticulous way. It is also, you suspect, a form of prayer for Thomas, a way of making the words his own, of inhabiting them through the act of adornment. You turn back to your own page. Your letters are plain, functional, serviceable. You have never had the patience or the skill for illumination, for the painstaking application of gold leaf and ground pigments. Your contribution to the beauty of the book is in its clarity, its readability, its usefulness as a tool for study and prayer. This is a humble contribution, you tell yourself, but a necessary one. Not every scribe can be an artist. Some must simply be workers, laborious in the vineyard of the Lord, producing the plain, unadorned texts that will be used by generations of scholars and monks who need words, not pictures. You are a stonemason, not a sculptor. You lay the blocks, square and true, so that others can carve the statues. This thought consoles you, briefly, before the boredom returns, settling over you like a heavy wool blanket. The scratching continues. Thomas returns, slipping back onto his stool without a word, and the scriptorium settles once more into its eternal, rhythmic quiet. You are a scribe. This is your life. This is your prayer. This is your slow, patient path to salvation, one letter at a time. The light through the oiled linen windows has taken on a deeper, ember quality, the kind of light that makes you think of honey and old wood and the few precious candles that will soon be lit. The armarius has risen from his own desk at the front of the scriptorium, a massive, sloping thing piled with exemplars, quires, and the various administrative tools of his office. Wax tablets for notes, a sand timer, a set of bone folders for smoothing parchment. He moves slowly down the aisles between the desks, his footsteps deliberate, his eyes scanning the work of each scribe with the quiet intensity of a shepherd counting his flock. You feel his presence before you see him, a shift in the air, a slight increase in the tension that hums beneath the scratching of the quills. You do not look up. You keep your eyes on your page, your hand moving steadily, your breath shallow. You are a model of focused industry. You are the perfect scribe. You hope. He stops beside you. You can see his robe in your peripheral vision, the dark wool, the rope belt, the soft leather shoes. He stands there for what feels like an eternity, though it is probably no more than 30 seconds. You feel his gaze on your page, tracing your lines, judging your letters, measuring your work against some invisible standard that exists only in his head. You do not look up. You do not stop writing. The scratching continues, but now it sounds different to your ears. Louder, more self-conscious, each stroke of the pen a tiny performance for your silent audience. He reaches down, and his hand enters your field of vision. He picks up the corner of the page you are working on, lifts it slightly, examines the underside, the quality of the vellum, the evenness of the ink penetration. He sets it down. He reaches for the stack of completed pages beside your desk, the ones you have finished and carefully stacked in order. He flips through them slowly, his thumb brushing the edges of the leaves, checking for errors, for smudges, for any sign of carelessness. Historians still argue about the exact role of the armarius in the medieval scriptorium. Some see him as a kind of editor-in-chief, a scholarly figure responsible for the intellectual content of the books produced. Others view him as more of a production manager, a foreman concerned with efficiency, output, and quality control. In your experience, he is both, and neither. He is the living embodiment of the monastery's authority over your work, the human face of a system designed to produce uniformity and correctness. He does not need to speak. His silence is more powerful than any words he could utter. You feel his judgment in the weight of his gaze, in the way he handles your pages, in the tiny, almost imperceptible pause before he sets them back down. He moves on, passing to the next desk, and you exhale a breath you did not realize you were holding. You have passed inspection. For now. The presence of the armarius, the constant possibility of evaluation, shapes everything you do. It is the reason you rule your lines so carefully, the reason you sharpen your quill so often, the reason you force yourself to focus even when your mind screams for release. It is also the reason you live in a state of low-grade, chronic anxiety, the kind that settles in your shoulders and your neck and makes your hand cramp just a little bit tighter. You are not writing for God. Not really. Not in the immediate, practical sense. You are writing for the armarius, for the abbot, for the unseen scholars and monks who will one day read this book and, perhaps, judge the quality of your work. You are writing for the approval of men, and you know this is a sin, a form of pride and worldliness that you should confess. But you also know that without it, without this mundane, human desire to do good work and be recognized for it, you would have given up years ago. The desire for approval is a weakness, but it is also, paradoxically, what makes you a good scribe. The armarius reaches the front of the scriptorium and turns to face the room. He raises one hand, A signal you all recognize. The scratching stops, abruptly, the silence rushing in like water into a sinking ship. You look up. He speaks, his voice a low, measured rumble that carries easily in the acoustic perfection of the stone room. He reminds you of the upcoming feast day, the need to complete certain texts before then, the importance of accuracy and devotion. He announces that a new exemplar has arrived, a gift from a sister house in Normandy, a copy of Augustine's City of God that will need to be reproduced. He assigns it to Brother Guillaume, the most senior and skilled scribe among you, and you feel a small, petty pang of jealousy that you immediately suppress. You do not want to copy Augustine. You want to finish your Psalms commentary and never look at it again. But the jealousy remains, a tiny, venomous creature curled in your chest, because Brother Guillaume gets the important texts, the ones that matter, the ones that will be read and studied and remembered, while you get the commentaries, the glosses, the secondary works that no one will ever read except out of scholarly obligation. The Armarius finishes his announcements and gives a small nod. The signal to resume. The scratching starts again, a wave of sound that builds from a few tentative scrapes to the full, familiar chorus. You pick up your quill. You look at the page. The words blur for a moment, and you blink hard, forcing them back into focus. You are a scribe. This is your work. This is your life. And somewhere, in a monastery you will never see, a scribe you will never meet is scratching out the same words on a different page, in a different light, under the watchful eye of a different Armarius. And the two of you are connected by this thread of ink and parchment, this shared, silent labor of love and obligation and quiet, persistent faith. You dip your pen. The scratching continues. The afternoon deepens, and with it comes a new challenge, the fading light. The oiled linen at the windows, once a pale, translucent yellow, has darkened to a murky brown as the sun drops behind the cloister wall. You can barely see the exemplar now, its letters merging into a grey smudge against the aged parchment. You squint, you lean forward, you tilt your head, but nothing helps. The Armarius, observing the growing darkness, gives a quiet signal, and two junior monks rise from their desks. They move to the few precious candlesticks positioned strategically around the room, tall iron stands with multiple arms, and begin the careful, ritualized process of lighting the candles. The scratch of flint on steel, the smell of burning sulfur, the soft flare of a flame catching the tallow wick. These sounds and smells cut through the monotony, a small drama in the quiet theater of the scriptorium. The candles are a luxury, and you know it. Tallow, rendered from animal fat, is cheap and plentiful, but it burns with a smoky, sputtering flame that smells unmistakably of the kitchen and leaves a greasy film on everything it touches. Better, far better, are beeswax candles, which burn clean and bright with a sweet, honeyed scent. But beeswax is expensive, a product reserved for the altar and for the most important feasts. The scriptoria makes do with tallow, and you have learned to work around its flaws. You position your page to catch the light without casting your own shadow across it. You learn to write by the flame's rhythm, pausing when it sputters, speeding up when it burns bright. You also learn to live with the smoke, which stings your already tired eyes and leaves a thin, greasy residue on your skin and clothes that will take days to air out. The candlelight changes everything. It transforms the scriptorium from a place of grey, diffuse light into a cave of dancing shadows and warm, flickering pools of illumination. Your own shadow looms on the wall behind you, a giant, hunched creature that mimics your every movement. The letters on the page seem to move in the unsteady light, shifting and writhing like living things. You have to be even more careful now, even more deliberate, because a sudden gust of air from a closing door or a passing brother can make the flame gutter. plunging your page into momentary darkness just as your pen is touching down. You have learned to hold your breath when you hear footsteps, to wait for the flame to steady before you commit ink to vellum. It is a slow, painstaking dance, and it makes the work even more exhausting than it already is. You look around the room in the new, flickering light. The faces of your fellow scribes are transformed, their features softened and deepened by shadow, their eyes gleaming in the candlelight like small, dark jewels. You see Brother Thomas, his face illuminated from below as he leans over his elaborate initial, the gold leaf catching the flame and throwing back tiny, brilliant sparks of light. You see Brother Guillaume, the senior scribe, his brow furrowed in concentration as he works on the opening of Augustine, his hands steady, his posture perfect, a model of scribal virtue. You see the younger monks, the novices, struggling to keep their eyes open, their heads nodding, their quills faltering. The Armarius watches them all, a silent, patient sentinel, ready to correct, to encourage, to judge. The candlelight creates intimacy and distance simultaneously, drawing each scribe into his own small pool of light and shadow, his own private world of ink and parchment. The work continues. You are deep into the Psalms commentary now, and the text has taken on a dreamlike quality in the flickering light. The words you copy seem less like language and more like patterns, designs, abstract shapes that you arrange in neat rows across the page. You catch yourself staring at a single letter, an R with a long, elegant tail, and you wonder how many times you have written that same shape in your life. Thousands? Tens of thousands? Your hand knows the motion, the pressure, the angle, better than your mind does. You could write in your sleep, and sometimes, in the darkest hours of the night, you dream that you are writing, your hand moving across an infinite page, filling it with endless lines of text that you will never read and never understand. It is not a nightmare. Exactly. It is just more of the same. An eternity of scratching, an afterlife of ink. A fly, drawn by the warmth and the light, buzzes around your candle. It is a foolish creature, you think, seeking comfort in a place that will kill it. It circles closer and closer to the flame, its buzzing growing louder, more frantic. You watch it, fascinated and horrified, as it darts too close, its wing brushing the flame. There is a tiny sizzle, a puff of smoke, and the fly drops to your desk, its brief life ended by its own desire for light. You stare at its tiny, crumpled body for a moment, and you feel an unexpected pang of sympathy. Are you so different? You too are drawn to the light, to the small, flickering flame of meaning and purpose that this work provides. You too circle closer and closer, risking everything for the warmth of significance, for the hope that something of you will survive the long, dark night of history. You brush the tiny corpse from your desk and return to your writing. The scratching continues, soft and steady, a small, persistent sound in the vast, silent darkness of the world. The light has shifted again, that imperceptible crawl of the sun across the winter sky, and you find yourself leaning closer to the page, your nose almost touching the vellum, chasing the last of the usable daylight. Your eyes burn with the strain, a dull, throbbing ache that has become as familiar as the cramp in your hand. You blink rapidly, trying to bring the letters back into focus, but they seem to shimmer and dance on the page, the black ink pulsing slightly against the cream background. This is the hour when mistakes are made, when the mind, weary from hours of repetition, begins to play tricks. You know this feeling well. You know the strange phenomenon where a common word, seen too many times, suddenly looks alien, its letters rearranging themselves into a meaningless jumble. You know the temptation to skip a line, to accidentally duplicate a phrase, to let your eye jump from one et to another et several lines down, losing your place entirely. The exemplar, with its dense blocks of text and its lack of punctuation as you understand it, is a labyrinth, and you are Theseus, trying to navigate its passages without a thread. To combat this, you have developed a set of small, personal rituals. You use your left forefinger as a guide, tracing the line in the exemplar as you read it, moving your finger along at the exact same pace as your quill moves on the page. You whisper the words under your breath, a barely audible murmur that you might mistake for prayer if you didn't know better. Beatus verci non abiet in concilio impiorum. The rhythm of the Latin, even if its meaning is hazy, becomes a kind of chant, a mnemonic device that helps your hand remember what your eye has just seen. You are copying not words, but shapes, sequences of strokes, loops, and ascenders. You could, you realize, copy a text in a language you had never encountered, in an alphabet you had never seen, simply by treating each letter as an abstract drawing. And in a way, that is precisely what you are doing. The Latin of the Psalms, filtered through a commentary written in a scholarly Latin that is even more complex, is a language you grasp only in fragments. You know Deus means God, and Dominus means Lord, and peccatum means sin. Beyond that, you are navigating by shape, by pattern recognition, by the sheer muscle memory of your craft. This is where the particular danger of your work lies. Because you are copying by shape, not meaning, you are uniquely vulnerable to a particular kind of error. The error of the eye, not the mind. You might see a word in the exemplar that has been smudged or faded over the centuries, and you must make a choice. Do you copy what appears to be there, including the damage? Or do you guess at the original form, attempting to reconstruct what the first scribe intended? Most scribes, including you, choose the former. You are not an editor. You are a copyist. Your job is fidelity to the exemplar, not to some abstract concept of the correct text. And so, if the exemplar has a hole where a moth ate through the vellum 100 years ago, you will leave a gap. If a drop of candle wax obscured a word, you will skip it. You will dutifully reproduce the errors of every scribe who came before you, layering your own potential mistakes on top of theirs, creating a palimpsest of human fallibility that will drive future scholars absolutely insane. Your own exemplar, you notice, is riddled with such ghosts. You can see where a previous scribe, perhaps as tired as you are now, accidentally wrote at it and then tried to scrape away the duplication, leaving a rough patch. You can see marginal notes in a different hand, tiny annotations that correct a spelling or offer an alternative reading, and you are faced with the constant question, do you copy the main text, or do you incorporate the correction? The Almarius has given you no guidance on this, so you follow the unwritten rule, main text only. The margins, you decide, are someone else's problem. This decision, made in a moment of fatigue and hunger, will one day puzzle a historian trying to trace the transmission of this text across Europe. They will wonder about the missing variant, the reading that was right there in the margin but somehow never made it into the next generation of copies. They will blame the scribe, you, for laziness or incompetence, not knowing that you were simply cold, your back hurt, and all you could think about was the bowl of soup waiting for you in the refectory. Your mind wanders again, and you catch yourself staring at the intricate penwork of an initial letter on the exemplar. The scribe who created that initial was a true artist, you think. They spent hours, maybe days, on that single letter, filling its interior with delicate interlaced patterns, tiny leaves, and the face of a bearded man peering out from the curves of the B. You have no such talent. Your letters are functional, plain. A serviceable Gothic bookhand that is clear and legible but utterly devoid of personality. This is by design. In many monasteries, individuality in handwriting is discouraged, even punished. It is seen as a form of vanity, a sinful assertion of the self over the sacred duty of transmission. Your hand is supposed to be anonymous, a conduit for the word, not a vehicle for personal expression. You are a tool, a human stylus, and your handwriting is the mark of that humility. And yet, as you scratch out another line, you wonder if, somewhere in the minuscule differences, the slight slant of your the particular curve of your G, there is something that is uniquely you. A tiny, secret signature written 1,000 times over, hidden in plain sight. The bells ring. Their sound crashes through the thick stone walls of the scriptorium, shattering the fragile cocoon of scratching quills and focused silence. You flinch, your hand jerking involuntarily, and you watch in horror as a black scar of ink streaks across the bottom of your carefully ruled page. You set down your quill with a sigh that is part frustration, part relief. It is the hour of sext, the midday prayer, and the entire community is called to the church. You rise from your stool, your back screaming in protest, your knees cracking like dry twigs. You have been sitting in the same position for nearly 4 hours, your body folded over the desk like a piece of discarded linen, and now it is demanding payment for that abuse. You flex your fingers, watching the joints swell and redden, and you follow the other brothers as they file out of the scriptorium in a silent, shuffling procession. The transition from the dim, cool scriptorium to the even dimmer, colder church is barely perceptible. The church is the heart of the monastery, its largest and most impressive structure, but it is still a medieval building, which means it is a permanent winter. Your breath plumes visibly as you shuffle into your assigned stall, the wood worn smooth by generations of backsides before yours. The stone floor sucks the heat from your feet through your shoes, and you can feel the chill seeping up through your legs, settling in your hips. The service begins, a familiar cycle of chanted psalms, responses, and collects, all in Latin, all in a rhythm so ingrained in you that you could perform it in your sleep, which, on some cold mornings, you suspect you partially do. Your mind, however, does not fully engage with the prayers. It lingers back in the scriptorium, worrying about that ink blot, recalculating how many lines you completed this morning, estimating how many days remain on this current gathering of pages. You are a professional procrastinator of the soul. You realize your body is here, in the presence of God, but your mind is elsewhere, wrapped up in the worldly concerns of ink and parchment and deadlines. The Armarius, that same presenter who assigns your work, is also keeping an eye on you during the service, watching for signs of drowsiness or distraction. Monastic life is one of total surveillance, both by your superiors and, you are taught, by God Himself. There is no privacy, no moment when you are not being watched, judged, evaluated. Even your thoughts, the monks are constantly reminded, are an open book to the divine, so you might as well behave as if they are an open book to your abbot as well. You try to focus on the chant, letting the familiar rise and fall of the melody wash over you, but your stomach growls audibly, reminding you that sext is followed by the midday meal, the one substantial reprieve in the long, hungry day. When the service ends, you process not back to the scriptorium but to the refectory, the monastery's dining hall. This, too, is a ritualized space, with long wooden tables and benches, a reader's pulpit where a brother reads scripture aloud during the meal, and a strict, unbreakable silence. You eat without speaking, listening to the drone of Leviticus, your meal a simple affair of bread, a thin vegetable pottage, and a small piece of fish or cheese, depending on the season and the generosity of the local nobility. The food is bland, monotonous, and insufficient for the amount of physical and mental labor demanded of you. But you eat it without complaint because complaint is a sin and also because it's all there is. You scoop the pottage with a piece of bread, wiping the wooden bowl clean. And you think about the ink blot again. You will have to scrape it. You will have to be careful not to scrape through the vellum. The thought makes your already sparse meal sit a little heavier in your stomach. After the meal, there is a brief period of rest, or what passes for rest in a monastery. You are permitted to walk in the cloister, the covered walkway that surrounds a central garden, to stretch your legs and, theoretically, to meditate. You walk slowly, your hands tucked into the opposite sleeves of your robe for warmth, your eyes on the flagstones beneath your feet. The cloister garden is bare in the winter, just a few skeletal bushes and a single, leafless tree. A small fountain trickles in the center, its sound a softer, more organic counterpoint to the scratching of quills you left behind. You pass other brothers, some walking, some standing and staring into the middle distance, some huddled in whispered conversations that are technically against the rules but are generally tolerated as long as they don't become too animated. You envy the lay brothers for a moment, the illiterate monks who work the fields and tend the animals. Their work is hard, physically brutal, but it is simple. They sow, they reap, they mend fences. When their work is done, it is visibly done. Your work, the work of the scribe, is never done. There is always another text to copy, another page to fill, another mistake to correct. You are Sisyphus, but instead of a boulder, you push an infinite pile of parchment up an endless hill. The church at Vespers is a different world from the scriptorium. Where the scriptorium is silent and still, the church is alive with sound and motion. The choir monks stand in their stalls, their voices rising and falling in the ancient chant, the Latin words wrapping around the stone columns and soaring up into the dark vaults above. Candles burn on the altar, dozens of them, pure beeswax that fills the space with warm light and the sweet smell of honey. The air is cold, but the singing warms it somehow, fills it with a vibrating energy that you can feel in your chest, in your bones, in the very core of your being. You stand in your stall, your hands folded, your eyes on the altar, and you let the music wash over you, cleansing you of the day's accumulated fatigue and frustration. You do not sing. Your voice is not good enough for the choir. A fact that was made clear to you in your first year as a novice when the cantor listened to you attempt a simple psalm and suggested, with a kindness that somehow made it worse, that your talents might lie elsewhere. You are a scribe, not a singer. Your contribution to the divine office is silent, your voice replaced by the scratching of your quill. But you listen, and listening, you have come to understand, is its own form of prayer. You let the sound enter you, fill you, transform you. You let it lift the weight of the day from your shoulders and carry it up into the darkness. You let it remind you why you are here, why you chose this life, or rather, why this life chose you. The psalm for this evening is a familiar one you have heard hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. Domin, clamavi ad te, exaudi me. Lord, I have cried to you, hear me. The words are ancient, older than the monastery, older than the language they are sung in, reaching back to a time before Christ, before Rome, before writing itself. They are the words of a soul crying out in the darkness, a soul very much like yours, tired and afraid and desperate for connection. You have copied these words. You have traced their shapes with your quill, formed their letters with your hand. But hearing them sung is different. Hearing them, you feel them in a way you never do when you copy them. They become not just words, but a voice that speaks for you when you cannot speak for yourself. The service continues through its familiar rhythms. Psalms, a short reading, a responsory, the Magnificat, the collect, the final blessing. You move through the motions automatically, your body knowing what to do even as your mind floats somewhere above it all, detached and observant. You watch the abbot, old and frail, his hands trembling as he raises them in blessing. You watch the cantor, his face rapt, his voice soaring above the others in the intricate melody of the solo passages. You watch the novices, their eyes wide, their voices uncertain, still learning the ancient music that will shape the rest of their lives. You are surrounded by your community, by the men who share this life with you, and yet you have never felt more alone. The music fills the space between you, but it also emphasizes the distance, the unbridgeable gap between one soul and another. When the service ends, you file out of the church in silence, processing back through the cloister to the refectory for the evening meal. This meal, collation, is lighter than the midday meal, often just bread and a small amount of wine or water, eaten while a reading continues from the pulpit. You sit at your assigned place, chewing the dry bread mechanically, listening to the drone of a sermon or a saint's life, your mind still half in the church, still wrapped in the echoes of the chant. The meal ends quickly, and you are dismissed to the dormitory, the large, open room where the monks sleep in their narrow, curtained beds. The dormitory is cold, colder even than the scriptorium, and you undress quickly, your fingers numb as you untie your robe and hang it on the peg beside your bed. You lie down on the hard mattress, stuffed with straw, and pull the single wool blanket up to your chin. You are exhausted, your body aching, your mind spinning, but sleep does not come easily. You lie in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the dormitory, the soft breathing of the other monks, the occasional cough or snore, the distant creak of the wooden building settling in the cold. You think about the page waiting for you on your desk, the unfinished line, the uncopied words. You think about the scrap of gold leaf still tucked in your robe, a small, warm secret in the cold darkness. You think about Brother Thomas and his silent gift, and you wonder if he is lying awake too, thinking about whatever it was that made him tap his desk and cry in the candlelight. Your hand, resting on your chest, moves slightly, tracing the shape of letters in the air. You are writing in your sleep, or trying to, your body still caught in the rhythm of the day. The scratching of your imaginary quill fills your mind, a soft, persistent sound that follows you down into the darkness of dreams. You are in the scriptorium, but the scriptorium is infinite, stretching in all directions, filled with desks and scribes and candles that never burn out. You are copying a text, but the text is your own life, every moment, every thought, every breath, transcribed onto an endless roll of vellum that unspools before you as you write. You write and you write and you write, and the scratching never stops, never falters, never ends. It is the sound of your existence, the sound of your prayer, the sound of your slow, patient erasure from the world. And in your dream, you are at peace. You wake in darkness, but it is a different darkness from the one you fell asleep in. This darkness has a quality to it, a texture, that tells you dawn is approaching, even though you cannot see it. It is the hour of matins, the middle of the night, the first prayer service of the new day. You rise from your bed before the bell rings, your body moving on its own, conditioned by years of this routine. The dormitory is quiet, the other monks still sleeping, but you know they will wake soon, pulled from their dreams by the same invisible hand that pulls you. You dress in the darkness, your fingers finding the familiar folds of your robe, the rope belt, the soft leather shoes. You are a creature of the dark. You realize. You live in it, move through it, work in it. The light is a visitor, a brief, precious guest that arrives and departs, leaving you alone in the shadows once more. You make your way to the church, your feet finding the path through the cloister by memory, by touch, by the slight differences in the stones beneath your soles. The church is dark when you enter, lit only by a single lamp burning perpetually before the altar. A small, steady flame that represents the presence of God in the otherwise empty space. You take your place in your stall, and one by one, the other monks arrive, silent shadows taking their positions around you. The service begins, not with a bell, but with a single voice, the cantor, intoning the opening words of the first psalm. Domin, labia mea aperis. Lord, open my lips. The words hang in the darkness, fragile and alone, before the rest of the choir joins in. Their voices blending into a single, unified sound that fills the church and pushes back against the night. This is the hardest service of the day, the one that demands the most from you. Your body craves sleep, your mind is foggy and slow, and the words of the psalm seem to slip away from you as soon as you hear them. You struggle to stay awake, to keep your eyes open, to keep your voice aligned with the others. You have seen monks fall asleep during matins, their heads nodding, their bodies swaying, sometimes even collapsing entirely. The punishment for such weakness is not severe, a gentle nudge, a whispered word, but the shame is real, the public acknowledgement that you have failed to keep the watch, that your devotion is not strong enough to overcome your body's needs. You force yourself to stand straight, to focus, to pray. Between the Psalms, there are readings, long passages from the Bible or from the Church Fathers, read by a designated brother from a lectern lit by a single candle. You listen, or try to listen, your mind drifting in and out of focus. The reader's voice is a monotone, a drone that could easily lull you back to sleep if you let it. You fight it. You dig your fingernails into your palm. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. You stare at the small flame before the altar and imagine it growing, expanding, filling the church with light and warmth. Anything to stay awake, to stay present, to fulfill your obligation to this community and to God. Historians still argue about the purpose of these nightly vigils. Some see them as a form of asceticism, a deliberate denial of the body's need for sleep in order to train the soul. Others view them as a practical necessity, a way of structuring the day around the ancient monastic ideal of continuous prayer. Still others suggest that they are simply a remnant of an older tradition, a habit that persisted long after its original meaning was lost. For you, in this moment, they are none of these things. They are simply what you do, what you have always done, what you will always do until you are too old or too sick to continue. They are the rhythm of your life, the beat to which your heart has learned to dance. The service ends, finally, and you return to the dormitory for a few more hours of sleep before the dawn. You lie down, your body trembling with exhaustion, and you close your eyes. Sleep comes instantly, a black wave that crashes over you and pulls you under. You do not dream, or if you do, you do not remember. You simply cease to exist for a few hours, your consciousness swallowed by the darkness, your soul floating in the void between one day and the next. The bell for Lauds, the dawn prayer, will wake you soon enough. But for now, there is only this: the deep, dreamless sleep of the just, the exhausted, the faithful. You are a monk. This is your life. This is your prayer. This is your slow, patient journey through the darkness towards a light you have never seen but somehow, impossibly, still believe in. Dawn breaks reluctantly over the monastery, a slow, grey seepage of light into a world that has forgotten what color looks like. You are back in the scriptorium, seated at your desk, your quill in your hand, your page before you. The candle from last night has been replaced, a fresh stub of tallow waiting in the socket for the moment when the daylight fails again. You look at your page, at the last line you wrote before the darkness swallowed your work, and you see that your fears were justified. The final words, written in the dying light, are crooked, uneven. the letters thinner and more erratic than the ones above. You will have to scrape them, or perhaps leave them, a small monument to your human frailty embedded in the otherwise perfect text. You decide to leave them. They are a reminder, you tell yourself, of the limits of your craft, of the darkness that always waits at the edges of your work. The morning light strengthens slowly, filling the scriptorium with its pale, watery glow. The scratching begins again, a gradual crescendo as the other scribes arrive and take their places. Brother Thomas is not at his desk. You notice the empty stool, the unopened exemplar, the untouched quill, and you feel a small pang of concern. He was unwell yesterday, you remember, his eyes red, his hand trembling, his silent tears in the candlelight. Perhaps he has been sent to the infirmary, or to the kitchen, or simply allowed to rest. You hope he is all right. You hope the scrap of gold leaf he gave you, still tucked in your robe, was a gift, not a goodbye. You push the thought away and return to your work. The Psalms commentary continues, page after page, line after line, letter after letter. You are deep in the heart of it now, past the point where the text feels new or interesting, past the point where it feels like anything at all. It is simply there, an endless stream of words that flows from the exemplar through your eyes and your hand onto the vellum. You are a conduit, a channel, a hollow reed through which the text passes without touching you, without changing you, without leaving any trace of itself behind. This is the state that the older monks call scribal trance, a condition of focused detachment that allows you to work for hours without fatigue or distraction. You are in that state now, or something like it. You are present, but you are not present. You are working, but you are not working. You are simply continuing. The morning passes in this state, the hours melting into each other like candle wax. You are aware of the bell for terce, the mid-morning prayer, and you rise and go to the church and return. The service leaving no more trace on your memory than a dream leaves on the waking mind. You are aware of the Armarius passing your desk, pausing, moving on, his judgment registered somewhere in the depths of your consciousness but not rising to the surface. You are aware of your hand cramping, your eyes burning, your back aching. But these sensations are distant, muffled, as if they belong to someone else. You are a machine for writing, and the machine is running smoothly, efficiently, without interruption or error. And then, something shifts. A word in the exemplar catches your eye, not because it is difficult or unusual, but because it is familiar. It is your name, or rather, it is the Latin word that sounds like your name, a coincidence of letters that means nothing in the context of the text but nonetheless jolts you out of your trance like a bucket of cold water thrown in your face. You stare at the word, your heart pounding, your mind racing. It is just a word, a random arrangement of letters, but it feels like a sign, a message, a communication from somewhere beyond the walls of the scriptorium. You look around the room, half expecting someone to be watching you, to have noticed your reaction. No one is watching. The scratching continues, oblivious to your small, private crisis. You look back at the exemplar. The word is still there, unchanged, meaningless. You force yourself to read the sentence around it, to understand it in context, to remind yourself that it is not, in fact, a message addressed to you. It is a word in a commentary on the Psalms, written by someone who died centuries before you were born, copied by scribes who never knew you existed. It has nothing to do with you. And yet, you cannot shake the feeling that it does, that somehow, across the vast distances of time and space, someone is speaking to you, calling your name in a language you almost understand. You sit motionless for a long moment, your quill suspended above the page, your mind spinning. Then, slowly, deliberately, you dip your pen and continue writing. The scratching resumes. The word passes beneath your hand, copied faithfully onto the vellum, and you try to forget that it ever meant anything at all. But you know you won't. You know that tonight, in the darkness of the dormitory, you will lie awake and wonder. You will wonder if the universe is trying to tell you something, or if your mind, worn thin by years of silence and repetition, is simply beginning to crack. You will wonder if you are going mad, or if this is what sanity feels like when you have been alone with your thoughts for too long. You will wonder, and you will have no answers. Only more words to copy, more pages to fill, more days to endure. The scratching continues. It always continues. The afternoon brings an unexpected visitor to the scriptorium. You hear the door open, a rare event during working hours, and you look up from your page to see the abbot himself standing in the entrance, accompanied by a stranger. The stranger is a tall man, dressed not in monastic robes but in the fine wool and fur of a secular lord, his boots mud-spattered from travel, his face weathered by wind and sun. He carries a small chest under one arm, a wooden box bound with iron straps and secured with a heavy lock. The armarius rises from his desk and hurries to greet them, his posture shifting from authority to deference in an instant. The scratching of quills falters, then stops entirely, as every scribe in the room turns to watch the unexpected drama unfolding at the door. The abbot speaks in low tones to the armarius, gesturing towards the stranger and the chest. The stranger nods, his eyes scanning the scriptorium, taking in the rows of desks, the stacks of pages, the hunched figures of the scribes. His gaze passes over you, pauses for a moment, then moves on. You are nothing to him, just another anonymous monk in a room full of anonymous monks. He is here for something else, something important enough to bring him to this remote place, to interrupt the sacred silence of the scriptorium. The armarius leads him to a small table near the front of the room, and the stranger sets down the chest, produces a key from a chain around his neck, and unlocks it with a loud click that echoes off the stone walls. Inside the chest, you glimpse a flash of color, a glint of gold, a richness that seems almost obscene in the gray, ascetic space of the scriptorium. The stranger lifts out a book, and even from your distant desk, you can see that it is unlike any book you have ever seen. Its cover is not simple leather over wooden boards, but something else entirely. Jewels, perhaps, or enamel, or carved ivory. It catches the thin winter light and throws it back in a dozen different colors, a small, portable window into a world of wealth and beauty that you have only heard described in sermons about the vanity of earthly things. The armarius takes the book carefully, reverently, his hands trembling slightly as he accepts this unexpected treasure. The stranger speaks, his voice carrying in the silence. He explains that the book is a gift from his lord, a powerful nobleman who wishes to ensure the salvation of his soul by donating this precious object to the monastery. It is a gospel book, he says, made in a scriptorium in Constantinople, brought back from the Crusades by his lord's father. It is written in Greek, a language none of you can read, but its beauty is its own form of prayer, its own testimony to the glory of God. The abbot accepts the gift with appropriate gratitude, promising that the book will be treasured and that prayers will be offered for the soul of the donor and his family. The stranger nods, satisfied, and after a few more words, he is led away, probably to the guest house for refreshment and rest before his journey continues. The moment the door closes behind them, the scriptorium erupts into a low, excited murmur, the silence broken by a dozen whispered conversations. The armarius does not silence them. He understands that this is a moment worth marking, an event worth discussing. He carries the book to his desk and lays it on a clean cloth, and one by one, the scribes rise from their stools and gather around, drawn by a curiosity that overcomes even their ingrained discipline. You join them, pushing your way through the crowd of woolen robes to catch a glimpse of this wonder from the east. The book is small, perhaps no larger than your hand, but it is dense, heavy, packed with pages and ornament. The cover is indeed encrusted with jewels, sapphires, rubies, pearls, set in gold and arranged in the shape of a cross. When the Armarius opens it, you see pages of vellum so thin they are almost transparent, covered in writing that flows in elegant, unfamiliar curves. The Greek letters are beautiful, alien, a reminder that there are other worlds beyond this one, other ways of praising God, other scribes scratching away in distant scriptoriums, doing the same work you do but in a language you cannot understand. The illuminations are unlike anything you have ever seen, not the interlace and geometric patterns of your own tradition, but figures, human figures, saints and angels and Christ himself, rendered in lifelike detail with a skill that takes your breath away. You stare at the face of the Virgin Mary, her eyes looking directly at you, and you feel, for a moment, that she sees you, that she knows you, that she is offering you a silent blessing across the centuries and the miles. Historians still argue about the influence of Byzantine art on the medieval West, about the trade routes and pilgrimage paths and diplomatic gifts that carried these objects across continents. But for you, in this moment, there is no argument, no scholarship, no historical analysis. There is only wonder, pure and simple, the kind of wonder you felt as a child when you first heard the stories of the saints. You reach out, without thinking, and your finger hovers just above the page, close enough to feel the warmth of the colors, the texture of the gold, but not quite touching. The Armarius notices, and for a moment you think he will rebuke you, but instead he simply nods, a small, understanding gesture. He knows. We all know. This is why we do this work. Not for the approval of men, not for the salvation of our souls, but for moments like this, moments when beauty breaks through the gray monotony of our days and reminds us that there is something more, something beyond, something worth all the years of silence and scratching and sacrifice. You return to your desk, your heart full, your mind spinning. The scratching resumes around you, but it sounds different now, lighter, more musical, as if the very quills have been touched by the beauty you have just seen. You pick up your own quill and look at your page, at your plain, functional letters, at your humble, unadorned work. And for the first time in years, you do not feel ashamed. You feel proud. You are part of something vast and ancient and beautiful, a chain of scribes reaching back to the beginning of writing and forward to the end of time. And your small, anonymous letters are links in that chain, holding it together, keeping it strong. You dip your pen. You write. The scratching continues. And it is enough. The visit from the Byzantine Gospel book lingers in your mind for days, coloring your work, changing the way you see the words on your page. You find yourself staring at your own letters, at their plain, functional shapes, and wondering if they could ever be beautiful. If beauty is something you could learn or something you are simply born with or without. You think about the scribe who made that book, somewhere in Constantinople, working in a scriptorium you cannot imagine, using tools and techniques you have never seen. Did he feel the same boredom, the same fatigue, the same creeping doubt about the meaning of his work? Or was he lifted by the knowledge that his book would be treasured, adorned with jewels, carried across continents as a gift for kings and nobles? You will never know. You will never meet him, never speak to him, never see his face. But his work has touched you, changed you, and in some small way, you are connected to him now, bound together by the invisible thread of ink and parchment. The Psalms commentary continues, page after page, line after line. You are nearing the end now, the final gathering of leaves, the last few chapters before the colophon where you will record, in your plain, functional hand, the date of completion and perhaps a brief prayer for your own soul. The thought of finishing brings a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a kind of sadness, a reluctance to let go of this text that has been your constant companion for so many months. You know every quirk of this commentary now, every difficult passage, every repeated phrase. You know where the exemplar is damaged, where the original scribe made errors, where the meaning is obscure and likely to remain so forever. You have developed a relationship with this text, a kind of intimacy that you will never have with any living person. It knows you, in its way, and you know it. And soon, you will hand it over to the binder, and it will become a book, and you will never see it again. The Armarius has already begun to plan your next assignment. You have heard him discussing it with the abbot, mentioning a collection of sermons by Bernard of Clairvaux that needs to be copied for a sister house in exchange for a copy of Gregory's Morale on Job. You will likely be given the sermons, a thick volume of dense, mystical theology that will take you another year, perhaps more. The thought is exhausting and comforting in equal measure. Exhausting because it means more months of silence and scratching and aching hands. Comforting because it means you will not have to stop, will not have to face the void that opens up when a text is finished, when the rhythm of your days is suddenly broken and you must find a new rhythm to replace it. You are a scribe. You need a text to copy the way a miller needs grain to grind, the way a baker needs flour to knead. Without a text, you are nothing, just a man sitting at a desk with a quill in his hand and nothing to write. Brother Thomas has returned to the scriptorium. He sits at his desk, 2 rows away, working on his Gospel of John with the same obsessive slowness as before. You have not spoken to him about the gold leaf, about the tears, about the strange, silent gift he gave you in the candlelight. You do not know if he remembers, or if it was some kind of fugue state from which he has now emerged with no memory of his actions. You do not ask. You simply acknowledge his presence with a small nod when you pass, and he nods back. And that is enough. That is how things are done here, in the silence, in the space between words. You understand each other without speaking, without explaining, without the messy, complicated business of human conversation. You are brothers, bound by more than blood. And the silence that surrounds you is not empty but full, filled with all the things you do not need to say. Today, the light is different. The winter gray has lifted, replaced by a pale, watery sun that actually casts shadows, that actually warms the stone walls and the cold floor. The Armarius has ordered the oiled linen removed from some of the windows, letting the rare sunlight pour into the scriptorium and illuminate the pages with a clarity that feels almost indecent after months of dimness. You squint in the brightness, your eyes unaccustomed to such light, but you do not complain. This is a gift, a small taste of spring in the depths of winter, and you savor it even as it makes your work harder. The letters are sharper now, more defined, and you can see every tiny imperfection in your hand, every slight wobble in a stroke, every uneven space between words. The light is merciless, but it is also beautiful, and you accept its judgment along with its warmth. You think about the future, not the distant future, not the end of your life or the end of the world, but the immediate future, the next few hours, the next few days. Tonight, after Vespers, there will be a special collation in honor of a visiting bishop, with extra food and perhaps even a small cup of wine. Tomorrow, you will continue your work on the Psalms, inching closer to the end. Next week, the binder will come to collect the completed quires of other scribes, and you will watch him work, folding and sewing and covering the pages with leather, transforming loose leaves into a book. These small events, These tiny landmarks in the featureless plain of monastic time are what you live for now. Not the grand drama of salvation, not the cosmic battle between good and evil, but the simple, human pleasure of a warm sunbeam, a shared meal, a task completed. You have learned to find joy in small things, to measure your life not in years but in pages, not in achievements but in days survived. It is a humble way to live, but it is yours, and you have made your peace with it. The end comes not with a flourish or a fanfare, but with a simple, quiet finality. You write the last line of the Psalms commentary, your quill scratching out the final words, the final letters, the final marks on the final page. You set down the quill and stare at the completed work, a stack of gathered leaves that represents months of your life, thousands of hours of labor, millions of individual strokes of ink. It does not look like much, just a pile of parchment covered in black marks, but you know what it is. It is a book, or it will be, once the binder has done his work. It is a piece of you, a fragment of your existence translated into ink and preserved for generations you will never see. You should feel something, you think, elation, perhaps, or relief, or pride. But you feel only a quiet, almost imperceptible satisfaction, the kind of feeling you might get from finishing a long, monotonous task that needed to be done. You are a scribe. This is what you do. You finish one book and you start another. The cycle never ends. But before you start the next, there is one final task. You reach for your pen, and on the last page, in the space reserved for such things, you write the colophon. It is a simple statement, just a few lines, recording the date of completion, the name of the monastery, and a brief prayer. Anno Domini MCCXLVII, in Monasterio Sancti Martini, ego frater quisquis eram, hunc librum scripsi, requiescat in pace. In the year of our Lord 1247, in the monastery of St. Martin, I, brother whoever I was, wrote this book. May he rest in peace. You do not sign your name. You never do. It is not about you, has never been about you. The book belongs to God, to the community, to the generations of readers who will use it for study and prayer. You are merely the instrument, the tool, the anonymous hand that held the quill. The colophon is not a signature but a prayer, a plea for remembrance and for peace, a small, humble mark of your existence embedded in the vast, anonymous sea of the text. You look at the words you have just written, and you think about what they mean. Brother whoever I was. It is a phrase that captures the essence of your life, the peculiar combination of identity and anonymity that defines the monastic scribe. You are someone, a specific person with a specific history and a specific soul. But you are also no one, a nameless worker in the vineyard of the Lord, interchangeable with any other worker, forgotten as soon as your work is done. The colophon is a small protest against this forgetting, a tiny assertion of self in a system designed to erase the self. But even as you write it, you know it is futile. No one will remember your name. No one will know that you were the one who copied this particular book on these particular winter days in this particular year. You will be subsumed into the anonymous mass of medieval scribes, a statistic, a footnote, a ghost. And somehow, in this moment, that feels right. That feels like the ending you were always meant to have. The Marius approaches your desk. He looks at the completed stack of pages, at the colophon, at your tired, drawn face. He does not speak, but he places a hand on your shoulder, a brief, firm pressure that conveys more than words ever could. Approval, acknowledgement, gratitude. You nod, and he moves on, already planning the next assignment, the next text, the next year of labor. You sit alone at your desk for a long moment, listening to the scratching of the other scribes, the eternal sound of the scriptorium. Brother Thomas is still working on his Gospel of John, still embellishing his capital letters, still moving at his own slow, deliberate pace. Brother Guillaume is deep in Augustine, his hand flying across the page with practiced ease. The novices struggle with their basic texts, their letters wobbly and uncertain, their faces screwed up in concentration. You are surrounded by your community, by the men who share this life with you, and you are alone, as you have always been, as you will always be. The light through the windows has shifted again, the pale winter sun beginning its slow descent towards evening. Soon, the bells will ring for vespers, and you will rise and go to the church and sing the psalms you have just finished copying. The words will be the same, but different, heard instead of seen, sung instead of written, shared instead of solitary. You will stand in your stall and let the music wash over you, and you will feel, for a moment, that you are part of something larger than yourself, something that includes not only the living but the dead, not only this monastery but all monasteries, not only this century but all centuries. You will feel the thread that connects you to every scribe who ever lived, every monk who ever prayed, every soul who ever sought God in the silence and the darkness and the endless, patient work of the hands. And you will know that you are not alone. You have never been alone. The scratching of the quills is the sound of 1,000 voices, 1,000,000 voices, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. We were here. We did this. We mattered. And then you will return to your desk, and you will pick up your quill, and you will begin again. Because that is what scribes do. They begin again. They always begin again. As the day fades and the candles are lit one by one, casting their warm, flickering glow across the pages, you sit in the quiet and listen to the sound that has defined your life. The soft, repetitive scratching of quills on parchment, a sound like rain on a roof, like insects in the grass, like the gentle turning of the world on its axis. It is the sound of time passing, of knowledge preserved, of faith expressed. It is the sound of human hands doing human work, reaching across the centuries to touch someone who is not yet born, someone who will hold this book long after you are dust and wonder who made it, who wrote these words, who spent their life in this quiet room, scratching away at the silence. And now, as you sit here, the scratching begins to slow, to soften, to fade into the gentle rhythm of your own breath. The letters blur, the candles dim, the stone walls dissolve into shadow. You are still here, in this moment, but you are also everywhere. Every scribe who ever lived, every hand that ever held a quill, every soul that ever sought meaning in the patient, repetitive work of preservation. The scratching continues, softer now, slower, a lullaby for the ages. It carries you, gently, towards the darkness, towards the silence, towards the peace that passes all understanding. Rest now, brother. Your work is done. The book is complete. And somewhere, in a monastery you will never see, a scribe you will never meet is just beginning theirs. The scratching goes on. It always goes on. Sleep well. A word count, 1098. The scratching softens to a whisper. The candles gutter one by one, and the great stone room fades into the warm, enveloping darkness of memory. You are no longer in the scriptorium. Not really. You are everywhere and nowhere. A presence without a body, a voice without a throat, drifting through the long corridors of time. The monks have gone to bed, their quills set down, their pages closed, their work suspended until the dawn. The books sleep on their shelves, their words waiting patiently for the next pair of eyes, the next seeking soul. And you, the traveler through this dream of medieval quiet, you too are ready to rest. The scratching has become your heartbeat, the rhythm of your breath, the lullaby that carries you down into the deep, peaceful darkness of sleep. There is no more to see, no more to hear, no more to learn. There is only the silence, soft and complete, and the knowledge that somewhere, in some scriptorium, in some century, the scratching will begin again. But not for you. Not tonight. Tonight, you rest. Tonight, you are the book, closed and still, waiting for the dawn. Tonight, you are peace,